Hello everybody, Juanita Abear here to talk to you about the technology integration lesson. So first, let's talk about the objectives of this lesson. What are the goals of this assignment? So we can see we've got 3 of them listed here at the top of the assignment handout. We have, you will collaborate with a group of students seeking certification in the same content area to design, plan, and present a 20-minute mini lesson. You will meaningfully incorporate technology to aid in the initial teaching of a new concept or skill, and you will reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of the lesson after teaching. So let's talk for just a moment about what each of those means. So the first one says you will collaborate with a group of students seeking certification in the same content area. So you already have your groups set. We will have talked about this in class by now, so you should already know who your group is. Now, it is possible that you might have more than one content area in your group. So if that is the case, if you have maybe some social studies and some Spanish teachers, or if you have science and math together, then what you're going to need to do is just sit down with your group and decide together which content area you're going to use for this lesson. Okay? The next part of that objective says that you're going to work with those students to design, plan, and present a 20-minute mini lesson. So I want you to keep that in mind. We're going to go through the whole process of planning and designing this lesson, and then you will be presenting it in class to your peers. And it needs to stick to about 20 minutes. So we're not talking an entire class period, and especially not an entire block if you end up teaching in a school that uses a block schedule. We're just talking about a 20-minute mini lesson. So make sure that you keep that time frame in mind as you're planning and designing. Now, the second objective says you will meaningfully incorporate technology to aid in the initial teaching of a new concept or skill. So again, we've got 2 parts to this objective that I want to talk about. The first is meaningfully incorporate technology. So I do not want any of you to say, hey, I really liked using Pear Deck. What can I teach with Pear Deck? If you do that, then you're going through the process backwards. So you should always start with the skill. So remember earlier in the semester, we talked about the Triple E framework. We talked about the SAMR model. Make sure that you are always deciding what you are teaching first, and then choose the technology that is best suited for that skill or for that concept. Now, the second part of this objective says that this technology is to aid in the initial teaching of a new concept or skill. So that means that you are to assume that your students that you teach this lesson to do not have as much prior knowledge on this topic. This is not something that you have taught them before. So you can assume anything that they would have learned in previous grades, but we're going to act as if this is the first time that you have taught this particular concept or skill to these particular students. Okay? And then the third objective is you will reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of the lesson after teaching. Okay, and so that is the peer review and the self-review that we'll talk about in the second video. So for right now, let's go ahead and get started on the planning. So this is week 11. This week, you will begin the planning process by completing a PLC planning document. And if you click on this link here, you can see it's blue and underlined, tells you that it is hyperlinked. If you click on that link, it will bring up the document in a new tab. Now, you will not have all these editing options, so what you'll need to do is download a copy of this document and save it to your computer. So the PLC planning document will help you break down the TEKS that you will teach and answer the 4 essential PLC planning questions. So at this point, you are probably sitting there wondering, what is a PLC? So let me tell you. A PLC is a professional learning community. It is an ongoing process, and educators should work collaboratively together with each other. So from my personal experience, when I taught in Goose Creek CISD, I was an 8th grade English teacher, and there were 4 other 8th grade English teachers. So I worked with those 4 other teachers, and we did our lesson planning together. We would analyze data together, and then we would use that data to determine what we were going to teach. So that was our PLC. The 5 of us were a PLC. So today, for this lesson, this week, your PLC is your group. Okay, so we're going to pretend that you are all teachers in the same grade level, the same content area, at the same school, working together collaboratively for your assignment. Okay, so you should have a copy of this document now. If you don't, go ahead and click on that link, download the document, save it wherever you'd like to save it, but make sure that you have this document open in front of you. Now, before I continue on, at this point, I do want to just say that if you are not already, I strongly recommend that you sit down together with your whole group and watch this video together with your group and go through this activity together with your group with me. This is a collaborative process. So what I don't want to see is 4 people in a group and you decide that each person's going to answer a question. Because if you divide and conquer an assignment like this, then you're not going to have a cohesive plan to your lesson. So what I would love to see is for you guys to sit down together all at the same time, watch this video, and go through this activity with me as I explain it. So hopefully right now you are all sitting together with your group. You are watching this video wishing that I would go ahead and get on with it. So I will go ahead and get on with it. First thing you're going to do is put your name on your paper. Sorry, that's the 8th grade teacher in me coming out. But you do need to make sure that you put your name. So I'm just going to put Mrs. Abear. Whoops. Okay. Woo! 1 box done. The next box is the grade level and the subject area. So as a group, you need to decide what grade you're going to teach and what subject you are going to teach. If you are all seeking certification in the same area, then the subject should be decided for you. However, if you are a mixed group, then you'll need to decide which subject area you're going to go with. And then you need to decide what grade level. Okay, so you might have 4 English teachers working together, but maybe some of you are wanting to teach middle and some of you are wanting to teach high school. So you'll need to settle on a grade level. Now for my example, I am going to go with 8th grade English, also known as ELAR. In fact, I'm going to put ELAR. That stands for English Language Arts and Reading. In the high school level, it's usually just called English. In the middle school level, it's usually called ELAR. All right, so if you have not already filled those boxes in, please pause this video right now and fill them in. Okay, welcome back. I hope that you paused that video and that you filled in those 2 boxes because we're going to keep on plugging. So the next thing, oh my gosh, this is so important, the TEKS. Everything in lesson planning always starts with the TEKS. So what are the TEKS? So let's go back to our assignment handout. If you scroll down underneath Step 1 Planning, you can see Resources. And I have hyperlinked all these TEKS here for you. So if you teach math, then you just click on Math, and that will take you to the TEA website, the Texas Education Agency website. And you can see the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, which is the TEKS, for mathematics. And then you can click on whichever area you need. So we've got elementary, middle, high school, and then, of course, there are other high school math courses that don't fall under the ones listed here. So let's say I am looking for 7th grade math. So I would click on middle school, and that's going to open this terrifyingly dense document. And you're going to want to scroll down to B, which is knowledge and skills. That's where the actual TEKS start. You can see that the numbering starts there. But this is 6th grade, so we're going to keep scrolling until we come down to 7th grade. So if I'm looking for the 7th grade math TEKS, I find grade 7, scroll down to B, knowledge and skills, and here are my 7th grade math TEKS. So that's how you navigate these documents. So just click on the area that you would like. So for me, I could click on English, come down to middle school, and then do quite a bit of scrolling to get down to 8th grade. So I think that was 7th I just passed. And here's 8th grade. Got the introduction part. Okay, section B, knowledge and skills. So here are the 8th grade English TEKS. Now, we do also have the Lead Forward TEKS resources linked here as well. I'm a huge fan of these resources. I like the way that this is laid out better than the way that this looks. So if you would prefer, this is what I like. So you'd scroll down to 8th grade, and then in the snapshot column, I am going to click on reading and writing. And again, that opens up a PDF, and it has the same TEKS, but they're just arranged differently. So we can see that, you know, they're put together by the genres. They're put together, those are all the reading teaks, and then down here, these are all the writing teaks. So it just organizes them in a little bit more of an intuitive way than the way that the state of Texas lays them out here. But it is completely up to you whichever way you would prefer to use. So what you'll need to do is decide with your group, make sure that it is a collaborative decision, decide with your group what single teak you are going to teach for this lesson. So for my example, I am going to be using teak 5E, which is make connections to personal experiences, ideas, and other text and society. So we can see if we look at the numbering here, and on the document, I do ask that you include the numbering as well. So we can see it starts with an 8 because it's 8th grade. Then 5 is the number of the teak, and E is the subteak. So if we look over here in the way that it looks from the state of Texas, so we have number 5, and then E, make connections to personal experiences, ideas, and other texts in society. So it's exactly the same in the two different places. They're just arranged a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is copy that, come over here to my document, paste it in. My default is set to keep the text only so that it matches the format where I paste it in. But because it's copying from a PDF, it gets a little wonky. So I just need to do that. And there we go. So if you have not already, go ahead and please pause this video right now. And with your group, look through the teaks, decide, you should already know your grade level and your subject. So now you just need to narrow it down to what single teak do you want to focus on for this activity. Okay, hopefully you now have a document that looks like mine's got a teak in there. So now the next thing that we're going to do is break it down a little bit. We're going to highlight in the teak a couple of important things. So the first thing is the verb. We always want to make sure that we pay attention to the verb so that we can make sure that what we're asking our students to do matches what the teak says that they're going to do. So we're going to highlight in yellow the verb. Now, connections isn't technically a verb. I highlight it because it goes, make connections, it goes together. But for the most part, you're just going to be highlighting verbs. So if you are not an English teacher, you need a little refresher. Verbs are the actions. So what is it that the students are going to do? Then you're going to highlight the content in green. So they are making connections to personal experiences. That's where I'm going to focus. Now, I could also highlight ideas in other texts. I could also highlight society. But for this 20-minute mini lesson, I'm only going to focus on their connections to personal experiences. A lot of teaks are very, very dense. They'll have many, many things listed in them, especially the social studies teaks. They have tons of stuff. You have the whole Civil War all listed out in one teak. Now, you're not going to necessarily teach every single thing listed in that teak in one 20-minute mini lesson. So use this highlighting with the green to really hone in on what specifically you want to teach just for this 20-minute mini lesson. So if you have not already, please pause this video, talk this through with your team, and highlight your verb in yellow and your content in green. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is get into those PLC 4 essential questions. So the 4 questions are, what do you expect your students to learn? How will you know when they have learned it? What will you do if they don't learn it? And what will you do if they already know it? These questions should be the basis of all of your lesson planning activities. So the first question, what do you expect your students to learn? Really think about what the teak is telling you. What is it that the students should be learning from that teak? So for me, they're making connections to personal stories. I want to make sure that we're focusing on fiction. So for this, I'm going to start with the first thing that they need to learn is they're going to read a fiction story. And they need to understand the character's experience. Then they need to think of a personal experience. They need to learn how to think of a personal experience that is similar. There we go. Thank you, Google, or Word. And then they need to, this is the big money item, they need to connect the personal experience to the character's experience. Okay, so this is kind of where you can lay out the steps for how they're going to accomplish what is it that they need to learn out of this lesson. So if you have not already, please go ahead and pause this video, talk through the TEK with your team. If you disagree on what you think the TEK is saying, talk it out. That is a part of the process. Okay, and then fill in question 1. Okay, question 2. How will you know when they have learned it? So we know what we're expecting them to learn in the lesson, but how are we going to know that they learned it? This is where you want to really start thinking about the assessment part of your lesson. So how are you going to know they learned it? I'm going to know this because they're going to write about a personal connection to a story. And it's probably a story that we've read together in class in a previous day, or maybe something that they're reading on their own in their silent reading time. Now, in that writing, I want them to explain how the personal connection relates to the story, and I want them to compare and contrast the personal experience, so their own experience, to the character's experience. Now, for me, when I'm looking at this, really what I'm asking them to do is write. And in that writing, they're going to explain and compare and contrast. So I'm going to scooch this over one to say this is what they're doing within the writing. So they're not doing 3 separate things. They're doing all of that in the writing. All right, so if you have not already, please pause this video, talk this through with your group, decide, think about the assessment. How are you going to know that they have learned what you want them to learn? All right, now before we get into questions 3 and 4, I do want to make sure that you all understand that I am not expecting you, we are not expecting you to complete these things in your 20-minute lesson. So what will you do if they don't learn it? This would be your plan for perhaps the day after this lesson. So they complete the assessment, you grade it, you look at it, you look at the data from it, and you decide who learned it, who didn't. What are you going to do with the students that don't learn it? So I do want you to plan for this part. I want you to fill this out, but know that this does not, the answers to questions 3 and 4 do not need to be a part of your 20-minute mini lesson. Okay, I just want you to get in the habit of thinking forward about what you're going to do after a lesson is completed. So what will you do if they don't learn it? So for me, with this particular TEK, if they're not able to make the personal connection, then I am going to reteach it with a different story. Because sometimes it's just that they're not connecting with that story, but if you give them something else, they might be able to figure out how to make that connection. And then in addition to that, I might do some small group sharing where they get to hear other students who did make that personal connection. They can hear their personal connections, and that could help them put those items together and figure it out for themselves. So those are 2 strategies that I can use with my students who didn't get it the first time. So if you have not already, please pause this video, talk this out with your group. If you were a teacher in a classroom, what would you do the day after this lesson with your students that don't learn it? All right, and finally, question number 4, what will you do if they already know it? What are you going to do if you have a student who writes out their personal connection in the first 2 minutes and they still have 8 minutes left in the activity? What are you going to do for your higher achieving students or your students that already come to you with knowledge? This is what we call enrichment. So we like to try to extend our students. So my extension activity for this particular TEK would be to add a 3rd component to their connection. I want them to, let's say, to their connection by connecting the character's experience and the student's experience to a societal experience. Okay, and if you look back up at the TEK, we do have society in the original TEK. So I'm still sticking to the scope and sequence. I'm still sticking to the curriculum, to the TEKs. I'm not, going too far out in left field. But we are still extending the student beyond what this particular lesson was. So you're taking your students that already have what they need and you're taking them another step further. So take a moment, talk with your group, pause this video, and decide what will you do if your students already know it. All right, and finally, objectives. Objectives are so important. For this particular activity, because it's only a 20-minute mini lesson, we only want 1 or 2 objectives for this lesson, and honestly, most of you should be writing just 1 objective. Sometimes we need to have 2, but for the most part, in 20 minutes, you really only want to have 1 objective for you to focus on. So what is your objective for your students? Now, there are a couple different ways to write objectives. So a lot of people like students will be able to. Some people just go students will. I personally prefer to flip the script and write the objectives from the point of view of the students. So today I will. Or sometimes I'll start it, today I will learn how to. So I like to do it in that perspective because I like to have my students read the objectives out loud every day, and when they say it from their own point of view, you're solidifying for them what they're going to be learning. So I am going to use the today I will format. So clear this out. And I'm going to write an objective. So use all the information that you filled in up here. And in this box, I'm going to say, today I will, if I'm the student, today I will read a fiction story and make a personal connection to a character's experience. Okay, so I've covered everything that my students are going to be doing in this lesson. They're going to read a story that is fiction. So with English, it's important to designate the genre. There are different things in other subject areas that you want to make sure that you include in there. And they're going to make a personal connection to a character's experience. Okay? And then, so that shows what students will learn. Now we need to include how will they show what they've learned. So how are they showing that? They're going to write about a personal connection in a story. So I'm actually going to revise this and say, write about a personal connection to a character's experience. So today I will read a fiction story and write about a personal connection to a character's experience. It shows what they will learn, and it shows how they will show what they've learned. Okay? So we want to try to keep those student-friendly, make sure that the students understand what it is that they're going to be doing in class that day. So for me, I try to write my objectives so that if a student comes in the classroom and says, hey, miss, what are we doing today? I can point to the objectives and say, you tell me what we're doing today, and let them take ownership of their learning. Okay, so this was the planning part. This is the PLC planning document. Hopefully, oh, did I tell you to pause? If you haven't already, pause the video and write your objective. All right, so now, hopefully after you paused it that time, hopefully now you have this complete document filled in. You've gone through this PLC process with your group. I hope that it was beneficial for you. You are going to turn this document in, and then I want you to watch the next video. So in the next video, How You is going to go over the lesson plan template and continue with explaining the rest of this document, the rest of the steps for this entire lesson, and what the assessment is for this lesson. Okay? So please do make sure that you read through this, make sure that you go through the resources that are here, and if you have any questions, as always, feel free to reach out to your instructor.